Around 6 years ago, my Berserk journey began. In search for edgy, hardcore anime, Berserk always topped people's lists. My earliest impressions were of relative disappointment, mainly from high expectations of demonic brutality that didn't consistently appear. By the end of the series, however, and with the appearance of the Advent, an appreciation for the story as a whole became clear to me. In a sense, the end justified the means. Years later, I would return to the series, but in manga and movie format, realizing that the content of the story from the anime was merely the tip of the iceberg. Most will probably save themselves money by just reading the manga online, whereas my partner actually orders me the paperback volumes on a monthly basis, and I am extremely happy that she does so. The sheer quality of the artwork alone is worth seeing on paper without a backlight burning into your eye sockets. After I finished reading the first 3 volumes, however, reading the Golden Age arc didn't appeal to me as much as the idea of watching an updated reimagining of the arc in trilogy film format. Condensed by about 50% with updated animation effects, this was a great fast-track way of refreshing my memory so I could crack on with where the story left me at the end of the anime. All the more reason to compare and see if I would recommend this trilogy of movies over the original anime. I will be analysing this film for its qualities on a technical level, deciphering where it succeeds in its storytelling and where it falls short. As of writing this review, I have just finished reading the 21st volume in the series, concluding the Conviction arc. As somebody who is only halfway through Berserk in its entirety, I would appreciate it if discussions in the comments were kept strictly to the arc in question today, the Golden Age. I do think it's a shame that the film doesn't start with an introduction to a world that is propped up by demon leadership. On the other hand, it was rather jarring to have such gritty, disturbing violence act as the introduction to the story, only to have it thrown to the side temporarily in favour of showing how Guts would become the Black Swordsman. And also it's the Black Swordsman arc, so it's not really going to fit into the Golden Age movie, is it? This also removes the need for that big opening monologue reminding us of the key question Berserk asks the audience. Do we as humans have free will, or are we merely playthings of the gods? The opening displays a fast identification of the protagonist Guts through these point-of-view shots and close-ups. The muffled sound of battle shows how accustomed to violence and war this character has become. As the battle rages on, the sight of a wobbling religious statue appears. When we consider that the anime was produced before the Conviction arc, this appears to be a nod to the rather significant role religion would play later in the story. In spite of this rather gripping opening, it quickly becomes clear how the CGI animation can make some shots look rather impressive, whilst others can look rather clunky for their low frame rate animations. Not to mention the rather janky looking blood effects. Yet in spite of these chinks in the armour, the fight with Bezuzo himself is rather impressive. We see not just Guts' tenacity, but his survival instincts at play, faster than any ordinary human eyeball would be able to comprehend, displayed through the use of slow motion. It's far better than this triple whammy still image animation you come to expect from the anime. This is enough for him to be noticed by the series' antagonist Griffith, though we simply don't know that would be the role he plays yet. In most screen adaptations of this story, it seems impossible to create a compelling opening title sequence. In the anime, the music always felt tonally inconsistent, whereas this movie version has a lot less rock and metal influence and is more in line with the dark fantasy genre. That's as nice as I can be though, because to me, it just seems, as always, totally unnecessary. A montage of all 3 movies and burning paper, even characters from the Conviction arc flash up on screen despite none of them will be making an appearance in this trilogy. The aftermath of the battle displays the real victims of war, the innocents. Following on from the shot of the crow falling from the sky, we now see crows everywhere as a stark reminder of this fact. A baby found amongst rubble, the faces of now refugee women and children. No context is given for this battle, and it's great to see this reality check, as many battles are to come in this story without much context or reasoning behind why these castles are being sieged to begin with. This plays into Guts' characterization, numb to conflict and its devastating devastating after effects. As a free spirit, the trifles of the powerful are irrelevant, as all he clings to is survival. He then meets his match when the Band of the Hawk decide to take him on. Sadly, minor members of the band don't get anywhere near as much development in this first film compared to the anime, streamlining the focus towards the trio and their struggles under Griffith's leadership. I don't think adding some Caucus shenanigans would have been too big of an ask, considering this film's length. This cut makes me feel that the advent will make audiences' emotional reactions less prominent as a result. Though they may flesh out these characters in future films, I just honestly can't remember if they did or not. It did seem rather odd too that whilst watching this in Japanese, a little bit of the English dub slipped in here. It's here that Guts' survival priorities are displayed as he is seen fighting dirty, chopping a horse's legs off, potentially killing a woman for the first time too. He is a raging bull, and only when faced with Griffith is he able to be tamed. The idea of ownership makes the pair's relationship so fascinating. Is Griffith merely domesticating Guts like an owner does a dog? Guts himself proclaimed earlier that nobody owns him. Does having a superior swordsman around make him more battle-worthy as he fights to reclaim his freedom? All this and more races through my mind when I see Griffith's striking blue eyes. Speed and technique win the day against brute force as Guts is taken in by the Band of the Hawk. Interestingly, the camera points upwards as Guts passes out, with what I'm guessing is either a white hawk or a dove flying overhead as Guts says goodbye to freedom. The score that's heard in this scene flirts nicely with light and dark, a victorious anthem accompanied by sinister cellos. Even at this early stage in the story, the lines between good and bad are blurry. The two main characters are clearly established as being this way through their colouring, yet by the end of this story the roles will have been reversed, and I think the music complements this idea wonderfully. One thing I will say about the pair's fight though, and it goes as a general rule for these films as well, is that the sound effects are brutally good. The clanging of swords, the crunching of bones breaking, blood splattering on the floor, it's all great stuff. It makes fights like this one all the more gripping, aside from the fact they are beautifully structured as well. You know it's over before it's begun because of Guts being wounded and all, but jumping on the sword, biting a sword, all this stuff is truly unique and makes for some stunning visuals. Sadly, the same can't be said of the following battle. It just doesn't quite look right. Here I am talking about this feature film being an update to the anime, despite this film being 9 years old in 2021. I don't doubt all this stuff would have been impressive upon release, but a combination of frame rate issues, blood spurts, and empty-faced copy-pasted soldiers just don't put me in a very bloodthirsty mood. I'm very glad there aren't constant thought tracks like in the anime, and I also like that the roaring success of the band causes problems with the nobility, especially as they've been so successful for 3 years. It's a shame that we don't really feel this jump in time because of all the minor characters that don't get to have enough interactions with Guts. I think of moments like Pippin carrying Guts to a celebration party where Guts finds not just appreciation but acceptance in the band. Halfway through the film, the band encounter Nosferatu Zod, Guts' first encounter with a demon. He sees his men dissected and destroyed. It's pretty terrifying. I found the added music to be a little unnecessary, as the silence in the anime truly made this moment frightening. Unfortunately, the frame rate issue rears its ugly head again too, and the contrasting CGI monster with 2D animation makes this whole affair rather clunky too. I think the biggest issue with this scene though is how an entire episode of the anime was dedicated to this event. The movie doesn't even give Zod 10 minutes of screen time. They don't make enough time to build up the fear needed to make the encounter worthwhile. Even his transformation is hidden behind a puff of smoke. The pair merely graze Zod when they attack him, as opposed to cutting off his arms. By seeing Zod using his arm as a weapon and then fixing them back on, we establish why this being has lived for hundreds of years. He's invincible. I think in the film he just isn't scary enough to truly make an impression on a first-time viewer. Obviously the pair being rescued by the mysterious Baelit is interesting as a concept, and I like that the demon is the first character to throw a spanner into the works as to what we believe about good and evil between Guts and Griffith. This leads nicely into this little segment between the pair, one believing Zod to be a god, the other a devil. Given that the pair are surrounded by the changing of the seasons, and this prominent swing undoubtedly undoubtedly is an indicator of this, their encounter with Zod would call for a change in tactics. And yet,
変わらないよ。俺は。
this belief since childhood of becoming the ruler of the world, no matter the cost, gives him this arrogant attitude and never-ending ambition. His encounter with Zod reaffirms his beliefs, and hence he will not change. The very fact that Griffith saved Guts from Zod contradicts this unchanging attitude. There's still shreds of humanity left inside him, but the roots that are seen visibly growing out of him in this scene indicate how destiny has already clamped him in place. Following on from this, I think that this scene is when the politics of power play a role in the story that is far more interesting than the events that have taken place thus far. How Guts won't kneel to the king, but will just for the sake of keeping his master happy. Griffith saving the princess from a nasty accident only for her uncle to slap him just for touching her. It's so clear that she's the secret in the shadows of these powerful people, totally alienated by their obsession with domination and bloodshed. The tension between the nobility and ordinary people starts to play a more significant role than the titters of the aristocracy behind the scenes. We have quite the strangely surreal moment with Griffith's leaf-blowing exercise. It's not exactly a pleasant noise, and the sinister piano music playing underneath gives this moment an almost childlike quality. Given the princess's circumstances, being locked away by her father, with Griffith's own sinister plans of rescuing her, this attempt at seduction comes off as uncomfortable to say the least. This makes his assassination that much more emotionally resonant, as this is potentially the most excitement and distress this princess has had in years. It's no wonder she clings to Griffith the way that she does. Before returning to the film for its climax, I just want to say I am so glad that the film cut out all of the cringy Korbowitz family nonsense. Credit where it's due, this character is a great representation of a cowardly aristocratic general who had been pampered with luxury his entire life. This made for great laughs now and then, but aside from that, his dawdling does choke up the anime with seriously boring moat and castle siege stuff that undoubtedly results in a hawk victory. Guts' assassination task is truly one of those moments that make the story so worthwhile. There didn't really seem to be as much build-up to it in the film, as Griffith informed Guts of his task in the form of a voiceover cut between shots of Guts infiltrating Julius's manor. I truly believe, though, that we don't see enough of Julius's brutality towards his own son in this film. Obviously, the aspect of absurdly high expectations in the nobility is touched on here, but again, it's not like the film is long and needs things cutting out. It just lacks substance like that to introduce the idea of nobility abusing their own to make them feel powerful, and a greater understanding of why Guts must do what he has been tasked with. The most heartrending part of this scene is how Guts kills the child Adonis. It is still a very brutal and hideously cruel moment that gives me shivers on watching. The real sting for me is how the anime showed Guts impaling the child despite seeing him, whereas in the film he doesn't. This makes quite a tremendous difference for Guts' character. One shows intent to kill a child, the other doesn't. A quick peep at the manga and we see that Guts doesn't realise who this witness to murder is until he's impaled him, so kudos to the film for correcting that little fault. Guts wouldn't kill a child that is in a similar situation as he once was. What I like most about this scene, though, is that Guts has truly come full circle. Despite being adored by his comrades, Cuska's insistence that he is nothing more than a cold-blooded murdering animal becomes truth here. It's commendable how they didn't flood the scene with music and just let the child's suffering fill the screen and speakers. The film concludes with this poignant scene on the steps in front of the castle during the princess's party. Griffith giving the big speech about dreams is intriguing, his character being filled with purpose despite ordering the murder of a man in his own home. His fixation on the dream also seems to prevent him from seeing his two highest ranking officers standing beneath him, listening to his every word. It truly shows that Griffith will put his comrades to the wall to achieve his goals, and that only an equally ambitious individual can be considered a friend to him. Guts, realizing that he himself doesn't have a dream and that he is merely a tool of Griffith's, lands him in a pit of betrayal that will challenge the pair's relationship to the point of breaking and becoming worst enemies. In conclusion, I feel about the same with this film adaptation as I do the anime. Just read the manga. That way you don't have a Chinese Whispers edition of one of dark fantasy's greatest stories. This adaptation is worthy for what it cuts, yet also hurts itself by making cuts to certain characters. I would guess that it is mostly from a desire to make an updated version of the anime, which 9 years on hasn't aged excellently. However, the sound effects are great, the updated animation style can make it enjoyable, and it can still make the most hard-hitting aspects of the story land an emotional blow. What do you think of this film? Comment below your thoughts, and remember you can always support the creation of videos like this one on my Patreon page. I give The Egg of the King a 7 out of 10. I'm only pausing so I can move the page down. I forgot my mouse today. Even at this early stage in the story, the lines between good and bad. Snap, snap. Snap, snap. Given the princess's circumstances, being locked away by her father, accompanied by Griffith... Guts' assassination... task? Oh yeah. God almighty, I've got a frog in my throat. I'm coming home. Right, that's enough Salisbury Hill for one day.